On this Sega Talk, we jump way back to Sega's early years as an electromechanical arcade machine manufacturer. So plug in and take a break from screens as we take a look at 10 electromechanical Sega arcade machines on this Sega's 64th anniversary episode spectacular of Sega Talk. Sega Bits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome to episode 142 of Sega Talk. I'm Electro Barry, and with me is Mechanical George.
Hello, everyone.
Beep, beep. Beep. On this episode, as we said at the top, we are not talking about screen games. We're talking about electromechanical games.
Digital stuff isn't...
Yeah, and there's, we're not going to get into the technical side of things, but electromechanical games are really fascinating, and I don't have it on me, but in the comments of this video, I'll share another channel's video. It's this guy who just went through his own pinball machine and talked about how it worked for like 2 hours. And,
and that's what you like to see online?
I didn't watch the whole thing, but it was really fascinating because it's all magnets. And so like electricity will flow through in a magnet, an electromagnet. It would pull something closer to the magnet, which would then trigger a light. And then they'd even have ones where there'd be three, and it would be like trigger a light, trigger a score. And it's just wild to me that like you can open up the back of these machines or lift them up, and you can see all the parts moving around. And I have to imagine that our Patreon picker for this episode, Zachary Ross, he probably likes ripping these things apart and looking at the insides of them too.
And if he's anything like me, he opens them apart and then he can't put them back together, and they're broken forever.
yeah, or gets electrocuted. I've gotten electrocuted by a pinball machine. It's not
really?
Fun. Yeah, multiple times.
That'll wake you up.
You shake a little bit. I mean, at least I'm not like testing my finger getting slammed in the trunk of a Tesla.
Yeah,
but, I baby steps, but. So Zachary, he picked this one. George, why don't you tell the fine folks how they can become a Patreon picker or just a patron in general?
If you want to support this show, Sega Talk by Sega Bits, you can check us out on patreon.com/SegaBits. There you can find us. You can support us for as little as $1. You get the audio version a week early. If you support us for $5 and above, you get the video version. And then there's also a tier to pick your own episode to make us talk about whatever you want us to talk about, and this one is a Patreon pick, so that means they get their memories read at the beginning of the show.
That's absolutely right, George. And so Zachary, who picked this one, he shared his memories, and boy oh boy does he have them. So I'm gonna jump right in here and read his, and at the end of the show I'm gonna share the memories of the rest of our patrons. And again, you can share your memories even at the introductory price of $1. So, we'd say 99 cents, but I think we have to do $1. So, Zachary says, though Sega does not have the longest history as a company like Nintendo, they still had great ideas that created both renaissance and new ways of playing for every generation of gamer from the one before it. Nintendo has its roots in Hanafuda cards in Japan. Sony has its roots in cheap electronics post-World War II Japan. Hey, I'm a Sony bro, don't say that. Sega has its roots in the US and its electromechanical games, slot machines, and jukeboxes that catered towards service members. My first knowledge of Sega's origins was a quick search online during the dial-up era. In fact, this is when I bought my first console, the Dreamcast, and was absorbed into the world of Shenmue. So many references in and around that world called back to Sega's early years creating electromechanical games. As a sucker for nostalgia and history of gaming, there are two types of machines that Sega has created that I hold dear to its history. These are the Sega 1000 Jukebox and their slot machines. The Sega 1000 Jukebox seems to be lost to time, and finding any new information on its history is far and few between. This brings to me a feeling of nostalgia in the saddest regard and a sense of mystery. Ooh. The Jukebox looks like a combination of a nickel newspaper stand mixed with a cigarette dispenser you would see in the foyers of cafes growing up. It feels familiar, though I have never touched, let alone seen one before. I am lucky enough, though, to have a wonderful collection of Sega history, including a model of one of their slot machines. Just the casing itself is heavy enough to flatten a steel-toed boot. The balance between imagination and engineering is all of Sega's electromechanical machines is so intentional and purposeful and simply made to bring a sense of wonder and joy to the player. This is something that can't be said for many new forms of gaming and machines, which seem to be created out of competition and leave the player feeling unfulfilled, void of imagination, and uninspired in their engineering. I do hope in the future to find and collect different versions of Sega's incredible slot machines, and maybe a jukebox one day by Rockola, which imported many jukeboxes from Sega. I am thrilled to know there are Sega fanatics out there like myself who continue to protect, appreciate, and spread the knowledge and fun of the company. The most important aspect to all things gaming, including electromechanical games, is not the programming or parts that make it the machine, but the people behind each one ever produced. People create games. People have their own individual lives full of pain and joy. We will never meet any of these individuals in our lives, so many are no longer with us. In appreciating and protecting these electromechanical machines, I feel that it best respects the lives of each individual behind their creation. Wow.
Huh. That's gaming history for you. And
yeah,
I think it's funny that we talk about how Nintendo is, I mean, they have been a business way longer than Sega. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that I think Sega has been making video games or electrical machines or actual gaming products longer than Nintendo. And I mean, not that they made toys. I guess that's a sort of game. Right.
But it definitely shows, because you look at Sega's arcade output compared to Nintendo's, and it's just laughable. I go to Galloping Ghost Arcade, and they can fill a tiny row with their Nintendo machines, but Sega, it's everywhere there. I would not be surprised if maybe 20% of their machines are Sega.
I would say they're one of the most sought after companies, right there with I would say Namco.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, before we dive into the machines, we're going to refresh our memories of Sega's early years from 1946 to the mid-'80s. And if you are watching this episode in chronological order, because we do have a chronological playlist, I guess this would be episode 2, because we unless something comes up in the future, but there is an episode we talk about the Sega logo. And so there is a lot of that in this. So if you are hearing a little repeat, remember the Sega logo episode we did a couple, 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
So to us, this might be kind of fresh. But we're going to hit 3 points: Formation, The Merge, and Gulf Western. So Formation, Sega's roots trace back to service games established in Hawaii in 1946 by Irving Bromberg. And we salute every time we say Irving Bromberg, and his son Martin, as well as James Humpert. That's James Humpert, focusing on slot machines for U.S. military personnel. Irving, an industry innovator, passed on management to his son due to his advancing age. The 1951 Gambling Devices Transportation Act led to a shift in focus. Sending representatives to Japan in 1952, they expanded to cater to U.S. troops stationed in Asia. So basically, the United States was not a friendly place for their kind, so they went over abroad to cater to Americans still, but in another country. So we're nearing 1960, because in 1960, service games split into Nihon Goraku Busan and Nihon Kikai Saizo, the latter trading as Sega Incorporated. So if you're ever wondering why Sega celebrates June 3rd, 1960 as their anniversary, which, as we record, we're on June 5th, so it was just recent, 64th anniversary. That's why. And some people point to 1940, 1946, but I think once the word Sega was on a piece of paper, that's fair to me. What is your take on that whole argument?
I mean, it's complicated. I think the formation and the founding of Sega is kind of complicated. It's a lot of moving pieces, companies merging into making what Sega came. And some people would even argue that Sega was always known as, when they were at their height, for their software, even though they made consoles, their world-class teams, and that didn't happen until the 80s. So it depends on who you talk to. A lot of people argue about this. I would say if Sega officially says June 3rd, and it's been the 64 years, I think we should take their word for it, since they are the company that officially had meetings and sanctioned this.
Right, and they pay us to say nice things about them.
Right, so I'm waiting for my paycheck.
Me too. I've been waiting 14 years. Nihon Goraku Busan dominated the jukebox market in Japan, eventually producing them domestically under the Sega brand. Their first original product, the Sega 1000 Jukebox, debuted in 1960. So again, 1960 was when Sega really made their first original product. Moving into the merge. During the Korean War, David Rosen, an American... we say his name too.
Yeah.
An American
he's
businessman.
Still alive, so I thought you salute people that have been fallen.
Yeah.
I like we're talking about him as an adult businessman in the 50s, and we're like, yeah, he's still alive, by the way.
I know, it's wild. An American businessman and former Air Force officer fell in love with Japan. In 1954, he founded Rosen Enterprises Incorporated, originally an art exporting business. However, they found success importing coin-operated instant photo booths from America, meeting the Japanese demand for ID photographs. With rising living standards, Rosen transitioned into the arcade industry, importing electromechanical games from Chicago. Hey, by 1961, the U.S. arcade scene declined due to stagnation. Rosen Enterprises then began producing their own arcade games, led by engineer Hisashi Suzuki. They quickly expanded to 200 Japanese arcades. Seeking growth, Rosen merged with Bromley's Nihon Goraku Busan, forming Sega Enterprises Ltd. in 1965. Sega's early focus was jukeboxes, but their breakthrough came in 1966 with Periscope, showcasing their arcade prowess. They pioneered rented gun corners and game corners across Japan.
Corners?
Yeah, they had shooting galleries.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
Remember those? I think we talked about them not too long ago.
The games, right? But they're not real guns, right? I
think they're pellet guns.
Okay.
Or maybe they're light guns, like they shoot a flash. I'm not sure. But these started in Tokyo and Osaka in 1965, expanding to larger venues like Golden Center Game Corner in Yokohama by 1968. So here we are now. Sega's the Sega we know and love. Kind of. I mean, they're not making video games, but they are making games. Still don't really have that home presence. Nintendo's making playing cards. Sony's making cheap electronics, as our Patreon picker points out. But here, as we move into golf and western, so Sega's ascent prompted David Rosen's desire to take the company public in Japan. However, he hesitated due to the unprecedented nature of a foreign-owned company entering the Japanese market, especially in the coin-op industry. Instead, Gulf and Western acquired Sega on May 3rd, 1969, facilitating its expansion into new ventures like importing American pinball tables and securing rights from Paramount Pictures. And kind of wild.
Yeah, what movies, like, what rights did Paramount Pictures have in the, 1969? Like, what movies would they license? That's what
that's a really good question. Let's see. So what's some movies coming from Paramount? Blazing Saddles.
Would you want to... Actually, that would make sense for, like, a pinball game, for sure.
Once Upon a Time in the West. The Italian Job. Ironically enough, there's a movie they released called Ace High, and I actually have the Gottlieb Ace High pinball machine, but it's unrelated.
Oh, yeah. Downhill Racer. They had quite a few movies for 1 year. I was actually surprised. A lot of British films, but yeah.
It's interesting, but I think they saw some synergy was there. I don't know if at this time people were really thinking about making arcade machines out of
licensed
film properties.
Right.
Yeah, I think the first one was actually the Fonz
right.
from Sega. That was one of the first licensed video games like that. But yeah, also, of course, Paramount Pictures, they do the Sonic movies now. So you have to wonder if there's some history there between them, and who knows?
I feel like there should be some sort of like electrical magnetic Sonic the movie pinball machine or something, just like released just because it's a fact that we know only. That's it. But actually, do they make new? I read something about how like an arcade pinball machines are made by like a new company that was founded in 2004, and they're like taking over making new machines of old pinball machines.
There are actually quite a few pinball machine companies still operating in Chicago. In fact, this fall there's a pinball expo and you can tour the factories. So I'm going to really try to do that. In fact, one of our followers on social media, and he's attended the arcade meetups, he actually works. He helps make pinball machines. Kind of wild. Multi Brawler, I think is his name on Twitter X.
Whatever it's called now.
Yeah, whatever it's called. But going back to 1974 now, Sega has become an American company after its first public stock offering, establishing Sega Enterprises Incorporated as the head office. By 1975, it opened a factory on the West Coast and introduced the first overseas amusement facilities called Sega Centers, known for their family-friendly atmosphere.
And there's never been pictures of these Sega Centers, right, online?
I don't believe... I have not seen them, but I know our Sega World episode we did not too long ago. I don't know if we touched on that, but we definitely talked about how early Sega arcade centers had a place until Sega World really turned it into more of a theme park almost destination, like an indoor theme park. But things are not going to be so rosy for Sega, and that's not a David Rosen joke. But as the video game industry burgeoned, Sega entered the arena, importing and later developing games like Turbo and Zaxxon in partnership with Gremlin Industries. They also distributed Frogger in the United States, and in 1978, Sega acquired Gremlin, rebranding it as Sega Electronics in 1982. However, Gulf and Western's financial woes prompted the sale of Sega Electronics to Bally Midway in 1983, halting product development in North America. Recognizing the potential of Sega's Japanese arm, David Rosen, along with Hayao Nakayama and CSK chairman Isao Okawa, repurchased it in April 1984, making it a subsidiary of CSK once again, and thus Sega returned to its Japanese roots. And as we all know, 1980, I think 5 or 6, they started rolling out those things, those like little machines with like buttons, you know?
Machines with buttons?
Yeah, so this is the crazy thing. So for a while, Sega actually made these like little machines that like took like cartridges and discs. There was one called Master System.
Oh, I think you're talking about like the mini consoles they've been releasing, the Sega Genesis.
No. They actually made these like big ones, and
what? That's insane.
Yeah. They stopped doing it in like 2001. But
why?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. But like, yeah, like I guess 23 years ago they did that.
Seems like a long time ago.
So there we go. And I guess now we can jump into the machines. Did you have an update on the Sega Centers?
I did. I sent you a Sega news article. There's a couple of pictures. They're not that great, but I just thought the membership card was pretty funny. It's just very plain. It's a Sega card.
Oh.
It's on Discord.
I see. I wonder if we could make these and give them to the people on Patreon.
I think that's what I was going to say. It's like we need to make some of these. I think they're interesting.
I love
with
the
little
logo.
with a little pink sticker on it and everything.
I love how it's like a black rainbow.
Let me see if I can put it on screen. Oh,
That's really cool. Yeah, there's very few images. There's only
2?
I think we have maybe a couple photos. Yeah, it's like a video someone took. Sega Center. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like an electronics store.
Right. It's weird that they just did them in malls like that, and it's always funny that Sega's tried this whole center stuff, and they always rebrand and relaunch it, and it just seems like something they never really... And now they're out altogether, so...
I see an orange Julius in one of these.
A
Frisbee.
All California, too. Industry, City of Industry, Los Angeles, San Bernardino.
Sega Center, where you play the games.
Interesting part.
That's very cool. Wow, well, look at that. And what I love about when we do these Sega Talks is often I'm coming in, like, pretty fresh because there's so much Sega history that obviously I don't know it all. So I love learning about all these new little weird corners of Sega history. And we're going to actually jump back to 1956. The first machine we're looking at, so we're going to look at 10, is the Sega Bell slot machine. And let's bring that beautiful little bell.
I love the design of this machine. I don't know, there's something about it. Even though it's a gajillion years old, it really speaks to the era.
Yeah. It's got this really cool like wood paneling on the side. It almost looks like a car, like if a car transformed into a jukebox or a slot machine. You know what I mean? Like
they're using like the red car color instead of the minty fridge color that some of the electronics used to have back then.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as anything else, it's really your basic slot machine. The Sega Bell was actually part of a series called the Bell series by Surface Games Japan. It probably emerged around 1956 or 1957. It's unknown. It's believed to be an unauthorized replica of the high-top slot machine by Mills Novelty Company.
Oh.
Surface Games possibly refurbished high-top machines, replaced parts in Japan, and rebranded them as Sega Bells. These machines are often customized to meet specific customer preferences. They were commonly set to accept U.S. dollar cents, typically 10 cents, for use in U.S. military bases in the Pacific. By around 1960, a distribution network was established to introduce Sega Bells to the United Kingdom, often adapted to accept sixpence. Additionally, the copper Sega variant was tailored to accept 1 pence pieces. And yeah, let's bring up image number 2. I hate to do this, but yeah, you can see that
it's a lot of they're the same.
They're the same machine. They imported these machines, stripped out. I think this would be frowned upon now. It's almost like if people are like, hey, Sega's making a new console, and then you look at it and you're like, that's a PS5. And it's like, no. We put a sticker over Sony. So now it's...
Right, and I'm looking at it, they did change, the Sega logo covers it. I don't know if this one's still being worked on, so the logo is in there. The logo of Sega is way more prominent on the Bell. But regardless... Yeah, and I think Sega's had kind of other games that people said that they refurbished and copied. So
yeah,
we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. But what are your thoughts on Sega slot machines and slot machines in general?
So I don't play slot machines. I do like the way these look, and I think they're cool to look at. Would I want to have one of these? Of course, just for the Sega history aspect and the rarity of it.
Right.
But do I play slot machines? No. Do I like slot machines? No. I think they're predatory, and they're just basically gambling. So I don't play them. What do you think about slot machines? I only play them in Sonic 2.
I like when they're within a game, like they're a game within a game. I'm not a big fan of them as actually utilizing them and playing them, and not that I dislike them. I don't know how it is where you are, but out here in Chicago, video gaming, which is different from video gaming. It's so funny how you'll see all these video gaming cafe, and you're like, oh, they have Streets of Rage, and you show up and you're like, oh, they have slot machines, but it's legal here, and
to have slot
when
machines?
I see the what's that?
To just have slot machines randomly in stores?
Yeah, well, they're randomly in bars, and they have gaming cafes. The idea is that they serve food and they just happen to have the machines, but really it's the opposite. They have the machines and then they just like have a bucket of crackers in the back or something, you know, like it's really low effort. But there are like licensed ones. So when I see the Ghostbusters machine, I'm like, I got to try that. But it's really not a machine. It's like, it's a general machine with a screen, and then the screens change out whatever you're playing. So it's not like you'll ever see a specific machine for a specific game.
Gotcha.
So it's not that exciting. You know, it's like the equivalent of saying like, oh yeah, my TV is a Nintendo Switch machine. And it's like, well, if you play a Nintendo Switch game on it, then yeah, I guess. But are you disappointed that these are just kind of reworked machines from another company?
I mean, everyone has to start somewhere, right? I'm sure
That's true.
I'm sure your first graphic design work you did was probably not very original, probably reworked.
Well, I mean, a majority of the articles I write on Sega Bits are just me telling ChatGPT to rewrite other Sega fan sites. I'm just
so
kidding.
I mean, it would be great if they had ChatGPT. I mean, and then you could just like, oh, what machine should we remake? I guess just steal. But yeah, it's so that's a start for Sega. I like the design of the machine. Mills did a good job. Sega did a good job stealing it and putting their logo on it. So that's cool.
Right, yeah, and I don't want Zachary to feel bad. I think it is a beautiful machine, and it's definitely a part of Sega's history. But it's the next one that I think really Sega's proud of is the Sega 1000 Jukebox from 1960. This is something that they manufactured themselves. Sega was so proud of it. I don't know if this was around the 60th anniversary, but you can find a Sega 1000 papercraft. You can download and print it out and make your own little machine for your counter. I printed one out a while ago. I have to find, maybe I have the files on my machine, but it's cool. Yeah, so this called the Sega 1000 Jukebox. It launched in Japan in 1960. It marked Sega's inaugural original product and a significant commercial breakthrough. It developed through a collaboration between Nihon Garaku Busan and Nihon Kikai Saizo, both segments of Service Games Japan. Its precise genesis remains elusive. Nonetheless, its success propelled the Sega brand into prominence following Service Games' amalgamation with Rosen Enterprises in 1965 to establish Sega Enterprises. So it was distributed in Japan. It was the first domestically made jukebox, which is a big deal. This is like they're not importing it. So I think there was a lot of pride behind this. You know, I'm sure coming out of World War II, like it was like, all right, truce, yeah, and then it's like, oh, hell yeah, Japanese-made jukebox, none of that American shit.
Well, not to be like that person, but like after the war, I'm sure the first thing companies did was sweep down and see where they could make money off of whatever was happening there, and they probably took forever to actually get Japanese companies to come back out of the rubble and start building instead of importing from America and getting more into debt with us. So it's interesting that they made this. I think it's funny because it kind of looks like the bottom of it is one of those like assisted wheelchairs for old
It does
women.
Look like a walker.
Yeah, walker. Yeah. There you go. And the machine has a very American arcade look to it, though. Like the way they make American arcade machines here in America in the 90s. Like the boards, the wooden boards on the side, they look painted compared to Japan.
That is interesting, though I would note that I feel like Japan has this like aesthetic of like metal bars, like you see that in the chairs that come with Astro City Minis.
Yeah.
It's an interesting mix of like Western and Eastern aesthetics.
And it has a big window on the front, which is cool. The buttons look interesting, and the artists are probably artists we never heard. Obviously, here we're never heard of, but it's It's a nice piece of history. Yeah,
absolutely. And like I said, first domestically made jukebox. It surpassed the imported counterparts in affordability, and it attracted Japanese eateries. So you would see this at a lot of fast food equivalent restaurants. Despite not attaining audiophile acclaim, so I guess they didn't sound that great, its accessible price point facilitated sales with 3,000 units sold by 1962. So that's not bad. Subsequent jukebox ventures by Sega included collaborations with Rockola, lack detailed historical documentation. So, you know, I'd like to say more, but there we go. So this is Sega's first true hardware entry. What are your opinions on the design? You kind of shared that, but have you ever seen a jukebox like this before? It's very unique, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen one that looks like this. I feel like most jukeboxes that you see aren't on a walker. So they're usually like just stationary. I'm assuming they did these so you'd be able to move it around a building. Like if you wanted to put it away for some event, you could.
Right.
Because it does have like this walker. It looks like you could just pick it up. But it's a good first try. But when's the last time you went into a restaurant and saw one of these jukeboxes and said, I think I'm going to put the track I want to listen to. I'm going to put money so everyone could listen to my music.
It's an interesting thing, right? Like, people don't really operate that way now, especially with, you know, earphones. Like, they want to keep their music to themselves. But
right.
I think there was a lot more of a communal approach to music back then. I think it was really exciting to, like, hear the new artists. And also it was kind of like, you know, like, I'll put a quarter in. We can all enjoy this song, and then the next one's on you.
Aren't you a little afraid, though, that you put on your favorite, I don't know, Nickelback song and everyone goes, boo, turn this song off? I
feel like people were a lot more into most of the music back then.
Right.
You know, like I don't feel like it was now, where it was really, and it was probably because they did not know the artists' like histories. Like, you know, you're not like, oh, that guy beat someone to death.
Well, even then, I wonder if there was, because you always see these videos, right, when the Beatles come around, all the girls are screaming. There has to be one where some girls just like not having any of it, hands crossed, looking at the stage going, this is horrible.
Right, until she sees Ringo, and then, you know, things change.
That's changed for me, too. Now I'm a big Beatles fan.
We have a very weird, I guess, rare photo here of an assembly line. I don't know where this image comes from, but it's very grainy. But there it is. It's a factory at Sega where they are building these machines. Look at that.
Jumpsuits and everything. Very rare vintage Sega working jumpsuits.
It looks like a photo of the middle of a black and white magazine, so it must be a very old.
Probably like one of those coin-operated magazines from the 60s.
It might be an industry magazine from like 1962, for all we know. So very cool. We're jumping ahead just a few years now to 1962. We're going to be looking at Punching Bag.
Ooh.
Look at Punching Bag.
That is very exciting. But this is kind of an iconic device for those, like, when you go to these sort of amusement places. Mm-hmm. Even now you'll see TikTok videos of this guy hits the punching bag so hard it breaks it or whatever. So these things are still popular. Absolutely,
yeah. And this came out in 1962. The object of the game is to punch the bag as hard as possible, obviously. In line with all early Sega Electro-Mechanical games, it is very similar to other machines such as Mills' 1900 punching bag and Bag Puncher. There was also Mutoscope's 1910 Deliver the Punch, or Punch-A-Bag as they call it, and Exhibit Supplies' 1941 Punch-A-Bag.
Sounds like they copied Sega, and Sega just was cooking a better product, and it took them this long to create it. That's what I see here.
Right. So in late 1800s, Sega had
they were already planning it. They were building it slowly.
Slowly for 62 years. It is interesting, though. You look at the machine here, and it's a gauge. There's Sega's logo there, but it's not like any Sega logo we've seen before. It's like it almost looks like a weird graffiti, like graffiti red Sega. Below that is Punching Bag, and then there's two guys like with boxing gloves. Have you ever played a punching bag machine?
Yeah, like when I was a kid, when we went to the circus, they used to have them. Yeah. I was all showing off, obviously. Very weak child, so didn't win any prizes. Have you?
Well, you know, I have, and I think you answered my next question, too. Why do you think they're still appealing over 100 years later? And it's because it is the ultimate way of showing off how hard you can punch.
Right.
And to have a machine that can actually unofficially gauge that, I mean, we still see that now on TikTok and Instagram.
Right.
There'll be kids and preteens posting their, visits to the carnival or at the arcade center, whatever they go to, the movie theater, punching that bag with the little digits. And I don't know how accurate those are. Like
it's probably all BS.
It's probably all BS. It's probably like every 30 hits, it makes it to the max, but that's the thing, because never once do they have you like sign an agreement saying this is an actual device that will tell you,
gauge your strength. This is a real gauge of your strength in a fight.
Exactly. And I think here, though, it's a little more legit because it's all based on Electro-Mechanical here. So you see the gauge there. I have to imagine there's some sort of air pressure system or something. I don't know. It's a very funny looking machine, but
if I ever had to make my own punching machine, I would have a scale on the side that's like BS scale, but it would tell you how hard you punch compared to, like, it'll start with celebrities, but it'll be like Gorilla, and then it'll just continue going up. And so, can you imagine that would make it a lot better? That way, your grandma could hit like a gorilla,
That could be the commercial. Your grandma can hit like a gorilla.
But yeah,
George's punching sack.
And I think everyone has a power fantasy of going into one of these machines with their friends and then hitting it and then getting the highest score, and everyone just starts clapping like you're a hero.
Exactly. And that's why I think the punching bag machine's probably the oldest, and it will be the longest running arcade machine. I think it'll outlast anything else. Yeah, I think 100 years from now, we're still going to have a machine that tells people how hard you can punch, even if it's like a little gauge and you just punch in front of like a little, I don't know, line or something. But the next one is a big one. So this one is Periscope.
A lot of controversy with this one.
Oh, yeah. Periscope, 1966. So, again, Electro-Mechanical arcade game by Sega. Features players using a periscope to shoot ships amidst interior scenery illuminated by a blacklight tube. It's an adaptation of Namco's 1965 arcade game of the same name, pioneering special effects and electronic sound in arcade gaming. This innovation birthed a new genre, revolutionizing the industry and revitalizing North American arcades in the late 1960s. Periscope laid the groundwork for the emergence of arcade video games in the early 1970s. And I did find a very intricate description of the gameplay. It's a little long, though. I'll read just a little bit of it, but you can find the whole thing on the Sega Retro Wiki article. As the game starts, boats start cruising by across the back of the scenery, and the front glass lights up. Torpedoes ready to fire. Look through the periscope and aim in front of the ship, and then press the fire button on the right handle. An electronic whoosh sounds is made, and the torpedo heads towards the boat. There are a series of 10 torpedo-shaped lights on the playfield that make the torpedo look like it's moving towards the ship. And there's all these other cool little bits and elements. I also have another image here, a very rare. I wonder how many of these exist. Probably not that many. Probably less than 5, maybe.
Oh, the multiplayer one?
The multiplayer one. It's amazing. Look at this thing. It's
ridiculously big, especially when you see the people in front of the arcade machine in the single one, and then now to think that they made 3 of these monstrosities. Like,
it's the size of a car.
Has this been found? Because I've seen some YouTube videos where someone, I guess, has a Periscope machine and they would show you a little bit of what it looks like in the scope. But I've never seen this one, right? Like, this is one of the, like, maybe there was one made for a company, maybe. Like, it's
very possible that there was only one. That's a very good point. Yeah, and I think a lot like the shooting galleries. I think once you set them up, they're not moving anywhere. So if these were somewhere, they're probably gone. You know, like when it's time to get rid of the Periscope machine, like they just have to disassemble it and trash it, unfortunately.
So even though a lot of people consider this kind of like, you know, the controversy of Sega ripping it off from other companies, and the idea of a military Periscope game is not that original. It could have been called The Gun Game or Sniper or something dumb. But the idea is going to be the same. You're shooting an object in the water, a submarine this time. This kind of did make it Sega from we're just doing jukebox and pictures to actually being a game. right? Where there's aiming and shooting, what we consider traditional video games.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too because a lot of Sega's early arcade games with, video screens were military focused between Afterburner, G-Lock, there was a lot of Air Force games, and it makes sense because, it's the most basic real world thing that you can turn into a game, flying a jet plane. But the fact that it's derived from it comes from the military, especially the U.S. military, is interesting. We have a few videos here, actually. This first one is the most mysterious video.
Oh, really?
It's like from...
Russia? It looks like here?
I think it's Russian, from 2 years ago.
Wow.
And look at this.
You think they brought this machine up because of the invasion they're doing? They're like, we need to practice. Pull out Periscope.
I have no idea, but...
You want me to play it?
It's... go ahead and play it.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a machine. The machine... Okay, you can see it. You know what? It's crazy how kind of creepy it looks when it shoots in the night.
Yeah.
It looks like it kind of has a nice little... See.
And I will say this might be the Namco one. I can't tell.
I've never seen the Namco one. That's the thing, though. There's only been, from the research I've seen, people have only found one picture of the Namco one, and it's outside. I don't think there has been a picture of the whole machine, the official, and it had a really low run from what I've read.
I think this is the Namco one.
Really?
Because they're showing...
when he shows it, it doesn't look like the Sega one.
But it's interesting because when you look at...
Maybe they showed it. That's crazy.
When you compare the machine's back image to the Sega one, it does...
They show a little bit of the machine from the front, but it's I was going to say this guy's channel, but it's in Russian, so...
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but it is cool to be able to see. I presume the Namco one in action here.
I don't see a logo on it because it's totally different design from what I've seen from the Periscope.
Yeah.
The Sega one has the actual you could see through it. This one doesn't. It just has windows.
Yeah, it's strange, but it is black lit.
Right.
So I don't really know, but. Interestingly enough, this game actually did have a home port. The first true Sega arcade game did get a home port, and it is in...
Sega Ages, of course.
Of course, something we can't play. Dynamite Deca, Sega Ages 2500 series, volume 26. Yeah, they went that far.
I always wish they brought them here because they're not super expensive, but to collect them all...
Yeah.
It would cost you so much because they're going for $30 to $45 each.
I would do that though if these were coming out in America back then and they were budget titles at $20. I'd be like, oh man, I got a shelf of 26 Sega remasters.
They look so awesome. Nice though together with the whole thing. They just
do. If someone said to me, Barry, what Sega thing do you want? I would say a full collection of Sega Ages 2500 with imported PlayStation 2. That would be mine.
It's doable. Just
it is
going to be a lot of money, but we could play the Periscope. This is so explain to them what this is. I'll play it.
So when Dynamite Deca came out to home consoles for the Saturn, right?
Yeah.
If I'm thinking correctly.
Saturn.
Dreamcast.
It came out on Saturn and Dreamcast, I think, right?
So there was a bonus game. It was a Sega arcade game called Tranquilizer. And when they remade the game for Sega Ages 2500, instead of putting Tranquilizer, they actually remade a 3D version of the... I mean, it's like playing in Yakuza, where you can play the UFO catchers. But here, it's an empty room with the Periscope sitting there, and it shows you every angle. It's like they recreated it in 3D. It's so amazing.
They should have released this in for Sega 60th. They should have just ported this to a free download on Steam to celebrate.
It would have been so awesome. And so this video we're looking at here, says press start. It's flying through the glass around the machine. It's like the best look at at Periscope you'll ever get.
Right.
And then once the game starts at around 3 minutes in, it's a very faithful recreation.
I don't even want to question like what work they put into recreating this, because we've seen their 3DS Sega Ages, and they go and they play the arcade and they recorded from the actual speakers that come out of the machine to be accurate to the sound. So I'm assuming they somehow got a hold of these obviously they got a hold of the machine and probably scanned all the assets and recreated it and measured it. So,
it's wild.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to do this for an extra for a game that, I'm going to be honest, probably did not sell over 2,000 units.
No, it did not.
Yeah.
So there you go. Like, if you ever really want to experience this game, it is out there. This next one now, leaving Periscope behind. Bye, Periscope.
Bye.
We are going to be talking about basketball from 1966.
Okay, wait. So, Sega invented basketball?
They did. In fact, basketball, the game we see now, was actually based... No, I'm just kidding. So it is a 1966 Electro-Mechanical game, renowned for its popularity and iconic design. It stands out as one of the earliest Japanese games featuring a plastic dome. Look at that.
It does look like a spaceship.
It's really cool looking, yeah. Its success inspired similar games like Taito's 1967 release, Taito Basketball, and Midway's 1968 rendition titled Basketball.
Damn, they really had like really good names for games back then. What's this game? Shooting.
Right, like nowadays, like you'd make some arcade game, you'd make some like RPG, and then it's like another company comes out with something vaguely similar. Like, I guess you could see they're targeting the same demographic, but here it's like, oh, Sega made basketball. What should we make?
Basketball.
Taito Basketball. Midway. Right. What should we make? Basketball.
Right. You would go into a like shop and there'd be 5 different basketball games with the dome.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It made its debut in 1966 featuring an angled plastic dome. 2 years later, a revised version sported a curved bubble-shaped dome, which I think we're seeing here. Likely for enhanced durability. This iteration also introduced 2 distinct styles of body, scoreboard, and control panels. In July 1967, Midway Manufacturing expressed interest in distributing the game. However, by the the MOA 1967 show, some trade show, Williams Electronics
Mechanical Operation Arcades.
Yeah. Williams Electronics had secured the rights to Basketball, Punching Bag, and Rifleman. 2 years later, Midway embarked on developing their own version, resulting in a game strikingly similar.
So they just copied Sega instead of going through with it. They're like, we already have a punching bag game, and we already have a Rifleman game. We just need the basketball game.
It's so funny because going back to that first game we looked at, the slot machine, Sega just straight took competitors' machines and put their logo on it, and now here we are. Williams is like, we will distribute your games, and then 2 months later they're like, or we'll make our own and just use your parts.
Right. Somebody finally told them about the slot machine from Japan. They're like, oh wait, they copied us? Oh, okay, then we could do the same.
And it's interesting, despite being basketball, you look at this and it's almost like there's like holes throughout. It looks like a bumpy bed almost.
So the way I think it would be played is if you have a ball, you start off in one end, right? And then you get to shoot it, and then you got to try to see how many times you have to go to hit the ball, maybe, or hit the basketball in the basket.
Yeah, so each of the little dimples in the board corresponds with the numbers on in front of the player. So if the ball falls in like number 4, you have to quickly push number 4, and it'll shoot it towards the other player. Get it?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's about reflex.
Yeah, so it is about reflex. It's very much not basketball, like in any sense. It just, outside of like 2 nets on either side, there's no other basketball rules involved. So I think how it translates to this miniature format is strange. But have you ever played any type of like tabletop sport game?
I mean, yeah, I have. I mean, air hockey, foosball.
Yeah,
those are probably the 2 best ones. Goated. easy. They're like the easiest ones to recreate, and it actually is kind of like the sport in a way. Obviously, not really the sport, but
Right. This one, not so much.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
This next one, 1969's Gunfight. This one's really beautiful. I love this one.
I like the Western Clint Eastwood red side panel.
Yeah. They have this. How did they do that back then? They did. I'm blanking on what it's called, but you would actually like screen printed. They would like screen print these beautiful artworks there, red, and then it would be a white overlay and then a black overlay to create the scene of a guy shooting a guy. It's great.
You think they had a machine or somebody hand screen print these back then?
I think they might have hand screen printed them. I mean, who knows how many machines they actually made, so you know. This came out in 1969. It was a 25-cent shooting game. The game pits two gunfighters against each other in a Western setting. Using a pistol handle controller, players move and shoot simulated bullets. Tops of cacti can be shot off, reducing the opponent's cover. When a player is shot, they are momentarily fallen to the ground before standing up again. Shots can be carefully aimed or triggered in staccato succession, and gunshot sound effects are given off. Hits are shown on individually illuminated scoreboards. The game is set to default to 30 seconds. And for those listening, it's really kind of amazing because it's not what you think. It's literally you hold a real gun, at least the handle part,
right,
and it's
wait. So
attached
the
to the
handle
machine.
was a real handle of a real gun attached to a fake arcade machine.
Right, and then inside there's a little like almost action figure of a man behind rocks.
Right.
And then there's a whole scene of cactuses, trees, and then like a little house, and then on the other side it's the same scene. It's like playing with action figures behind glass. It's very bizarre.
I'm going to play it. There's some footage here, so I haven't played it
There's
yet.
footage, and the footage is just awesome. Like, I want to play this more than any other thing we talk about.
Galloping Ghost needs to get... How hard would these things be to, like, fix all the time? They had to break down all the time. There's so many moving parts.
Probably very difficult. Let's check out this video. It's only 50 seconds.
Yeah, I've been playing it. I'm watching it right now. It's insane.
Yeah.
You're like on a little rock, and you move back and forth, and... Kind of reminds me, I don't know. It's cool that you could also bend down over the rocks. Like, what is this, Time Crisis?
Yeah. And you can shoot the cactuses in front of the person. It's just so funny.
Oh yeah, and they fall. They really went all out on this game. Like, the thinking and creativity for it.
Yeah. I really love this one. Like, I don't know if I'd want... You know, I probably would want to own this because it doesn't take up that much space. You put it against a wall.
Where will you find it? I do wonder, like, these, like, electrical... Like, I've never seen this in the wild. I've been to arcades before and events.
Well, I've got some good news, bad news. So the guy who posted this video, it is for sale. He has his phone number here in the YouTube comments.
16 years ago, though.
16 years ago, yeah. His company is...
Call him right now.
No, I usually would do that, but I don't want to call
Can you imagine? It was all hello? That was 16
He still
years
has
ago.
a website, though. COINOPNY. Coin Op New York.
Looking at it right now.
Look at this. Wow. What does he have? Jukebox. It's mostly Jukebox, Pinball Machine, or Coin...
He doesn't really have that many pictures.
No.
Go ahead and talk to him and be like, I loved your video, and then he'll pull it out.
He's done like stuff for collectors and celebrities. That's really cool.
You know,
This is nice.
it looks like he does a lot of like restoring work.
Yeah.
Nice. And he has
Yeah,
like a
good for
restaurant.
him. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So that was Gunfight. What surprised you the most from seeing this game in action?
Basically they kind of replicated the idea of playing toys in a kind of action-oriented field where that could actually break cactus. That was interesting, and I like that you could actually bend over and it gives you some sort of strategy, like you could whiff a bullet if it doesn't hit your character, that kind of little thing.
Yeah.
It's very like rock, paper, scissors, but you got to understand a lot of Sega went from just a slot machine to actually making real games with actual strategy to them. So that's interesting.
Yeah, this is the one I could see the most, like, feeling like they were held back by what was possible at the time, and I think if they could make a video game, they would have. Like, this is the most adaptable to video games. So, yeah, it's quite amazing. This next one, 1970s soccer.
We call it football over here,
Football.
boy.
This is a game manufactured by Sega S.A, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Sega S.A?
Sega S.A, it is Sega S.A Service Games Sociedad Anonima, emerged as a Spanish amusement company on March 25th, 1968. It was founded by shareholders linked to Sega Enterprises Ltd.
As in Spain or Latin America or where?
In Spain.
Gotcha. They even have the little shield on their logo in this one.
Yeah, it specialized in manufacturing coin-operated amusement machines and pinball tables, marking the sole legally produced coin-op equipment in Spain during this period. And, you know, not much to say about soccer itself when you look at it. It's kind of like foosball, but not really. Like, there's only one operating stick, so I have to imagine...
You just play the goalie, I'm assuming? Like,
I presume...
And everything else is just there for, like, bumpers? Like, I wonder... I'm assuming that the ball bounce... This is what I assume. That you're the goalie, you hit the ball, and the ball bounces off of things, and if it gets close to you, kind of like pinball, you hit it back, and whoever misses it scores. That's what I think.
Likely. Yeah. I think what's more interesting about this one is Sega S.A, and if you go to the next image, you can actually see the Sega S.A warehouse. Look at that.
This looks massive.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, as mentioned, this was a Spanish amusement company established in 1968 by Sega Enterprises shareholders. So it's kind of, it is and it isn't Sega. It's not as though they own it, but it definitely has connections to people who owned, control over Sega.
Yeah.
There is an entry on Sega Retro. It's not really... I don't want to say it's not an interesting read, but it's a very, very, like, merger and person's name heavy article, so it's really not worth reading about on the podcast, but I urge people to jump on Sega Retro, search SEGASA, and they can find the whole history there. The most interesting thing that I found is that in the mid-70s, Sega changed their corporate logo. So Sega S.A, which was originally using that like medieval times Sega logo, they changed their name to Sonic. And this was 20 years before Sonic the Hedgehog. So, yeah, so this company that had ties to Sega was called Sonic. And they actually produced quite a few games. But I think most notably, they made some pinball machines, including a hang-on pinball machine, which is just wild to me, in 1988. They also did Casino Royale, which I do not think... It's weird because it looks like it's connected to the James Bond, but it isn't. It's like kind of James Bond bootleg. And also very interesting... Sega S.A. actually went defunct in 2006. They actually existed for quite a long time. They went out of business because, they kind of shifted into, I think, gambling. And it just was, not as lucrative as they thought it would be. They only had 15% of the market. So, they went into debt and they went belly up in 2006.
I will say, for a company that was just made by shareholders, it lasted for way too long, I would say. Considering all things, how the arcade markets have been shrinking since forever. Congratulations on outlasting what I assumed. I thought it was going to be like a 6-month fling. Like, they made some and...
No, and I think a big reason for that is they were separate from Sega. So Sega couldn't really make the decision to shut them down or fold them in or rebrand them. And, going back to our Sega World episode, if you recall, some of the longest lasting Sega Worlds were the ones that Sega did not have direct control over. We were speculating that it's possible there is still one Sega World in operation, because they let like a company like Taiwan or whatever have complete control. So they were like, well, we have a need for these facilities or for these machines, so we're going to keep making them. Whereas I think if you have a large controlling international company, they're going to look over at one country and be like, I mean, we're making some money, but not enough. Let's close it down.
They're more profit driven, and somebody that just makes arcade games will probably be okay with making arcade games as long as they get a paycheck every month and they can support their family and continue the business. I agree. I mean, we're seeing this now with companies where, companies are literally just like, yeah, we made $1 gajillion this quarter. Anyway, we're going to fire these 3 big developers for no reason. So it just happens. It is what it is.
Yeah. But let's lighten the mood.
Yay.
Let's bring on my favorite image, Sega Winner.
Why is this your favorite image? It is a nicely well shot, colorful. I like her clothes matches the logo.
I just love it. It's great.
The horses and everything. It has like a cool color matching. I love the whole layout of this actual thing, like the orange and the yellow and the red and pink and how it all matches.
Our audio only listeners are like, what the hell are they talking about?
Explain, but as a graphic designer.
1971's Winner pinball table. So we're looking at the flyer, the arcade flyer for this, and it is she's cute, Japanese woman, dressed as a jockey, but she's riding a merry-go-round holding a trophy, and she just looks so happy. She's got such a cool costume.
She has those knee-high cholo socks on.
Yeah,
and everything's matched. It's all red and white. It kind of looks like something that would be shot in the White Stripes band by the band. Yeah, because they just coordinate the red and white. So I like it. It looks cool. It's a striking ad.
It is, yeah. And what she's actually promoting is a pinball machine. So this is a 1971 Electro-Mechanical pinball table by Sega, featuring a horse racing theme. It holds significance on 2 fronts. Firstly, as Sega's inaugural self-engineered pinball table, diverging from its prior reliance on U.S. imports from Bally and Williams, and secondly, it spearheaded the Japanese pinball scene's rise in the 1970s. Amidst a market dominated by U.S. imports, Sega's tables boasted lower prices and superior returns, some priced as low as 30 yen, which 50 yen being the norm. So this was the budget machine, you know.
Not a real winner, really, if you think about it. Like, if you're not making money to afford the 50 yen machines, you're not a real winner, my dude.
Well, the winner is the person who owns the machine, because imagine that, like, you know,
bigger returns.
60 yen gets you 2 plays, whereas 50 yen would give you 1 play on another machine. So for just 10 more yen, you're a winner. I love the artwork. It's got like this wild like guy and girl going crazy because the
weird
horses are winner. The table itself.
Her leg is all.
The table.
Look at her leg. Is all screwed up on this artwork on the thing. She's like, what's up with her knee?
I don't know. Yeah, the table is interesting. It's got a horse with a really funny face. I'll admit, as I love the lady on the flyer. I wish she was on the machine itself. These women don't look as, like, just the drawings look weird. They've got the like baggy pants, the jockey pants.
It doesn't fit the same aesthetic that they were going for with it. But I will say, how do you think this compares to other arcade machines in the same era? Like, is this more simplistic, more complicated? It looks very simple to me. I'm not a big pinball.
You know, it's both simple and complicated, because I would say that when you look at this machine, you know, you have the flippers on the bottom. It definitely does look a little more budget, because there's a lot of plastic pieces.
Yeah.
You know,
lights.
It is a wood rail game, but I mean, I have a wood rail game. It also has a lot of plastic pieces, but this one, it just seems like there's a lot more reliance on like various little like doodads and tricks. So for example, when you start the game, it goes down, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places it can drop down. And then you got the bumpers. There's a little place where it does like the hold, like it holds the ball and then spits it back at you. So there is like a lot of variety. I see 3 little places that you hit. One of them is like a jockey head. I guess my only complaint, what I like about I like it when a pinball machine, like you can look at it and immediately understand how to play, and you can say, oh yeah, I see how it's adapting horse racing. Here though, I
you don't really see that.
I don't see it. Like, I don't understand it. I presume the numbers at the top are the horses. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You pick your horse. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe they should have, like, made it like a racing track, and then when you hit the bumpers, there's, like, different scores. And then
right. Yeah. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't read as horse racing, and I don't really understand the mechanics here. Again, to talk about my machine, it's called Ace-High, and it's pretty like evident what you need to do. You hit the targets to put more like face cards in your hand, and then once you have them all, you have Ace-High, and then like the machine awards more points. But here,
1957, is that when it came out?
The one I have, Gottlieb's Ace-High, yeah. So this one's quite a bit later, and I think it's kind of cool. There's a first winner and second winner, 2 and 3. Yeah, I don't understand this game. I'd love to play it, but
Ace-High has a lot better artwork than this one for sure. I mean, it just looks nicer. It has a more, I don't know, that vintage arcade American feel. I think that's the problem. They're trying to replicate an American arcade feel, and they should have just kept it Japanese, in my opinion. But I guess. Yeah. Do what Romans do.
Exactly. And I mean, horse racing is popular there. Remember, we have Greatest 9.
Yeah.
So, and Sega did make a very long line of horse racing games. Wasn't there one called Star Horse?
Right.
That they brought to iOS. So, it's
an arcade thing, but yeah, they do bring them, yeah.
This next one is called Moto Champ.
I like the name. They could have just called it motorcycle. I'm sure they wanted to. They're like, come on, don't. And then they're like Moto Champ. And I was,
right.
Like it.
It's a 1973 electromechanical machine. It has several small motorcycles on the playfield, and the object is to take the player-controlled motorcycle to the other end of the playfield. While this is happening, the other game-controlled motorcycles impede progress. A motorcycle collision results in a penalty. The player gets 4 penalties in a game before ending. A penalty also moves the motorcycle back on the playfield. If the player can advance the Moto Champ far enough up the playfield with a minimum of penalties, a free game can be won. The main disadvantage of this game is the lack of scoring. The only real measurable score in Moto Champ is winning a free game. And you can see the machine here. It's cool. It's almost got vibes of like Hang On the side art.
The exact same thing. I was like, the art, like you could tell AM2 saw this art in this machine and were inspired in a way to make what they made. Like Hang On is just like the evolution of this machine. Like you see the handlebars, they look real.
Yeah.
And Hang On, you actually sit on a replica motorcycle and you flip it side to side. So it's cool. You could really tell that this one is a game that could influence Sega, and you could see the history, I guess, there, right?
What do you think about just 10 years later, you go from this to Hang On?
That's insane leaps. I think we take it... we don't really appreciate the leap in technology we've seen, like going from this to actual video arcade machines that have screens inside a motorcycle that you could move side to side and it changes the digital character on the. And then we went from that to having 3D polygons in the Nintendo, like in the mid 90s, and then now.
Right, you jump ahead 10. You jump 10 years, like Moto Champ to Hang On.
Right.
Hang On to I don't know, like what would be like a mid '90s motorcycle racing game? I guess they start to get polygons, maybe
Right.
Mode 7 graphics.
We could just say that
Super
Moto.
Scalar.
What's that Moto one in Moto? I forgot what it's called.
MotoGP.
Yeah, I think so. The one on N64.
There was a Saturn one.
Yeah.
Hang on, GP or
I guess we could always just say it's racing like Daytona or
right.
or
But then you jump ahead another 10 years, mid 2000s. It's like, wow! Now we've got Metropolis Street Racer, Project Gotham Racing. Jump ahead another 10 years, and you've got Forza.
right. and the Forza open world games are insane. I don't know if you played those, but they're ridiculous. You could like travel ridiculous distances. It's crazy graphics. So
Right.
yes, it's just. And also, you could play them at $15 a month because they're on Game Pass. So it's even worse. Like, we got spoiled for sure. Because you would probably
wild.
spend like a dollar, which is $50 today with inflation, to play one of these machines.
Yeah.
Or
It's
I guess a
wild.
quarter, right? Because Sega was the quarter masters.
Right. Or what is it, 500 yen or 50
Right.
yen? But yeah, so it's not a very, like, I would not want to own this machine because it would not be fun for a long time.
No.
It
cool.
wouldn't hold my. It's cool though, and I'd love to play it. I actually played in San Francisco on the wharf or whatever. There's a big Electro-Mechanical arcade place. Have you ever been there?
No, I have not. I've seen the
It's-
website, though.
It's worth going to because they don't have this game, but they do have some old Sega arcade machines where it's like when they were on the cusp of video, so it's like it's very, very basic. But it's so fun to play them, but man, you're like, I could not own this in my house. It would be the most boring machine,
Right.
It would. But you know what's not boring?
Oh, tell me.
Sega UFO Catcher.
Really? I mean, I think this is probably the most... The machine that Sega made in the past that has existed forever, because I think everybody that's gone to a theater or a mall or even a grocery store, I think there's a grocery chain here that carries UFO machines in the lobby when you exit. And they're the Sega UFO ones.
It's wild. I saw a UFO Catcher at a Walmart near me not too long ago, and I was so
same
hyped.
here. Like the
and
super
then I
ones.
went back and it was gone.
Oh.
Like they got rid of it and they replaced it with like some shit company, like that made shit claw machines. But UFO Catcher,
High quality name.
high quality name. It's a crane game released by Sega, 1985, and marked the start of a line of machines bearing the UFO Catcher name. The 1985 model is a boxy machine with a pink-red finish intended to attract female players. It is reportedly more susceptible to breakdowns than later versions, and the angular nature of the cabinet was at one point identified as a safety hazard.
Hey, it's fine.
During development, the machine was known as Eagle Catcher, and the claw being an eagle's foot. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Although it was reportedly changed due to mechanical limitations, creating a crane that looked more like a UFO. References to this older name can be found in technical manuals and part descriptions. So, what are your thoughts on UFO Catchers?
I think being a UFO made it iconic. It's so iconic that Toy Story literally made a character based on the idea of this being a UFO, because those little aliens you catch with the claw machine are an alien because the machine's called the UFO machine.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would be weird to, like, I don't know, just it's been like so iconic that it's ingrained in our American pop culture. One of I would say Pixar's best movie franchise they've made ever is Toy Story. So yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Like the UFO, obviously it's supposed to be you're the UFO and you're catching toys, like you're kidnapping people on Earth.
Right.
Yeah,
it's really such a unique machine from Sega, and I think it's the standout one of this 10. And it makes sense because it's the most recent one. It's the last one we're discussing on this episode, but there's so many weird decisions that just work so well. The name UFO Catcher is weird, but it works.
Right.
The fact that they went with a reddish pink to attract females, but in the end it's just like an iconic color, like this Pepto-Bismol colored machine, and they carry on that color for decades until I think they went with white, which is unfortunate because I like this color more. And then, we have footage here from Yakuza 0, and this is showing the 1987 variant of the machine. So then I think it's the next model.
Right. I was going to tell you, I was looking it up right now, but like crane machine, I was like, did Sega create the idea of the crane hand? And I guess not really, but I always think of it as, like UFO catchers, because even if you look at the claw machine wiki, they call them UFO catchers, and isn't Sega the only one that owns the name UFO catcher?
I think so, and I do think Sega is the only one to make this shape of the claw. And you can actually, what's interesting about the 87 machine is there's art on the side. You can see it in the Yakuza 0 video of like a UFO character. So
okay,
they did.
I'll play the machine. I was just looking at the history. I think it's interesting that them and Taito, but it feels like Sega kind of outgrew them in the brand. Nobody even knows who Taito. I mean, unless you're a hardcore gamer, you don't know who Taito is. Like, they don't have brand names that sadly that survive time. I do like Bubble Bobble though, so let's play the machine. Okay, I mean, obviously everyone's played Yakuza and everybody's played it, but I always love that they added the UFO machine, and it's been that the team at least thinks this is part of living in Japan as an adult.
Right. And I mean, the items you get here are much nicer than what I think you actually got at the time. Very much doubt that there were Opa.
You get some. I don't know if you. There's a website where you can see all the. I think they call them Nippon or something like that. Game toys you get from these things. You could technically buy them, obviously, because sellers sell them without you playing it. But it's some insane stuff they put in these machines, and some very rare things you could get. Especially Sega gear, anime gear. It's ridiculous. Sega. I think they're under Sega Toys brand that does all that stuff, right?
Yes, you'd be correct. Right. Yeah.
It's insane. I think I'm actually kind of jealous that Japan gets all those, like, because I think they have like an app and everything that you actually could see where each machine has what in stock. From what I've read online, we just don't have that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you'd be right. Like, there's different ways that you can like play remotely, and then they just ship you the item. It's
crazy.
It's really cool. Yeah, and there is, if you recall, a UFO catcher like backpack that you can still order, like a little bag from Japan, and I've actually had it in my Amazon Japan shopping cart for the longest time. But it's just,
I'm looking at it now. Oh my god!
Price,
is this going to be cute? Is it going to be your daughter's backpack for school?
No, it's going to be mine.
Your backpack when you pick her up.
Well, the scale of it's perfect for like if you have tiny little plushes, because then you can put them in there, and it's like they're the prizes. But
if you have a puppy, you could put them in there and take them on hikes, so people could see them. In the middle.
My only annoyance is that it says it's out of stock, even though I have it in my cart saying it's in stock.
It says on eBay they're selling it for $56 with a little penguin inside.
Well, the eBay one, that's probably a good price, because the one on Amazon Japan, the shipping is where they really get you.
Oh, I didn't see the shipping. How eBay is, they hide the shipping until you click it. Let me look at it.
Yeah.
Free shipping. It looks like. I can't see. I don't see it, but yeah. It looks really small though. It doesn't look like a backpack. It looks more like a handbag you put soap and stuff in. Never mind.
Yeah. So that's the UFO catcher. And I think we could probably do an episode on UFO catchers.
There's so many of them.
I didn't want to get into it because we did do an Astro City candy cabinet one, and I think a UFO catcher one would be a lot of fun. We could talk about like the weirdest prizes. We could talk about the first versions all the way through the last versions. But I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Having talked about 10 electromechanical machines, which one stands out to you of all 10 of them?
So if we're not going to be using the UFO machine, definitely the Western one. The rifle game. I'm surprised you didn't talk about Duck Hunt. But isn't that electric? I mean, isn't that video? I'm not sure. Regardless, yeah, I would say the UFO machine and the Western one. Periscope obviously is iconic and changed Sega, but I feel like those other ones is more, especially the rifle game is more video gamey, and UFO machines are iconic for being everywhere. And crane games are literally called UFO machine games now for a reason.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Yeah, I guess if you're not picking the UFO Catcher, I would pick that one. I just think that one, obviously, of the whole history, it came at the end, and it still continues on to this day. But I think when you go through this list provided to us from our Patreon picker, he actually picked these 10, so it wasn't just the electromechanical concept, but these 10. I feel like Periscope, you start to kind of get that Sega vibe, but because there were other Periscope games, it kind of makes me hesitant to really point to that one. But I think Gunfight, for sure, it's so fun looking. I haven't seen a machine like that before. And then from there, really, it's like, it doesn't really feel like a Sega game until Moto Champ, and I think that's because of the hang-on feel, the fact that I think they've used Moto in other games, so yeah, that would be my pick. Which I guess I answered the next one. Which ones feel like Sega games? So yeah, that would do it. I would love to jump back into the electromechanical world again someday. We could cover another 10. But for now, George, do you have any parting thoughts before I read the Patreon memories?
Nope. Go ahead.
All right, here we go. So like we said at the top of the show, if you support us on Patreon at any level, you can have your memories read at the end of the show, though if you're the picker, it's at the top. We have Ben Hayward here saying, I must admit, I never even knew these existed before hearing about them on prior episodes of Sega Talk. Looking forward to the episode. Then we have Nicholas Schaefer saying, my memories of Sega electromechanical arcade machine games is that I just listened to an amazing Sega Talk about them, and it was a very fascinating and informative episode. So,
oh,
yeah,
nice.
Look at that. Wow. Hams said, I have no memories of these contraptions. That's like an old man. I have no memories of these contraptions.
You think that if he was so old, though, he would be like, yes, back in my teenage years.
You know, in my opinion, Sega stopped being Sega when they stopped making electromechanical machines. The last good game they made was in 1965.
Can't believe they put on a TV. Lazy. That's not real gaming.
Can you imagine if they had Discord back then? People were like, hey, did you play basketball? Oh, it's so sick.
I mean, have you seen the Usenet's old 90s comments on video game wars? It's ridiculous.
I have, actually. Yeah, they are ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. The next episode, George, I believe it's going to be a personal pick from you, so you don't need to tell us right now. You could surprise us in 2 weeks, but what are you leaning towards? Can you give us a hint?
I'm thinking of something weird, maybe something like a list like this. I will be posting what do they call those? A pool on our Patreon for our Patreon pickers to pick the next episode. I'll give you guys 4 ideas that I'm thinking of, and you guys get to choose it. And so whatever you guys vote on, check it out. It'll be up on Friday. The pool.
Love it.
So thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode of Sega Talk. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey.